Support comes from Hampton Roads Community Foundation, partnering with donors from all walks of life to improve southeastern Virginia through grants, scholarships, and leadership initiatives. Learn more at hamptonroadscf.org.
Support comes from Thomas Nelson Community College, now becoming Virginia Peninsula Community College, the first choice to start a bachelor's degree since tuition is 1/3 the cost of four-year schools. More at tncc.edu.
Hello, everyone. I'm Barbara Ham-Lee. Have you ever heard of Cuffeytown? If Cuffey is a part of your family tree, you probably have more knowledge than most. Cuffeytown is a historic community that was created by free blacks and dates back to the 1700s. On this very special Another View history program, we'll talk about life in Cuffeytown for free blacks, the soldiers who fought in the Civil War, and how ancestors and the community are keeping the story of Cuffeytown alive. Cuffeytown in Chesapeake. That's next on Another View, right after this national, regional, and local news from NPR and WHRO News.
Discussing today's topics from an African-American perspective, this is Another View.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Another View. I'm Barbara Ham-Lee. Tucked away in the Long Ridge section of Chesapeake is Cuffeytown, one of the oldest continuous communities in Virginia, created by free blacks in the 1700s. Residents consisted of Cuffeys, Civils, Browns, Whitehursts, and other families, and their ancestors keep the story of the town alive through oral history. In fact, our Lisa Godley, our show producer, is a relative of the Cuffey family, and so we are here talking about some of your family members and this wonderful place that we call Cuffeytown. So here to talk about this historic community is Reverend Dr. Sandi Hutchinson. She is pastor of Gabrielle Chapel A.M.E. Zion Church, located in the heart of Cuffeytown. How are you, Reverend?
Well, thank you.
Thank you so much for being with me. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Retired Army Colonel Moses Whitehurst, who grew up in Cuffeytown and has done extensive research on its history. Colonel, how are you?
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you so much. And finally, Larry Hicks, a.k.a. Cochise. Hi. He is a member of the Buffalo Soldiers Motorcycle Club in their efforts to honor the soldiers of the United States Colored Troops buried in the Cuffeytown Cemetery. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Honored to be here with you.
Absolutely. So, Lisa, I know that you and your daughter, Jordan Yowell, put together a education piece on Cuffeytown to talk about the history and so forth. Let's take a listen.
Cuffeytown, also known as Long Ridge, can be traced back as far as 1778. The community is located in the Hickory section of Chesapeake, not too far from the Virginia-North Carolina line. It wasn't just the Cuffeys, but several families, the Civils, Browns, Suttons, Spences, Jones, and Whitehurst, who built a rich history here. And a few of their descendants were kind enough to share some of that rich history that has been passed down through generations.
My great-grandfather was born in this community in the 1700s.
Our family was free. All of our family, yes.
During Cuffeytown's origins, the Hampton Roads region was home to about half of Virginia's free black population. In Norfolk County, which eventually became Chesapeake, the number of free black people more than tripled over a 70-year time frame.
They farmed the land and they raised like lima beans and black beans, and they dried it. They had their own fruit trees, their own poultry. Certain time that they would go and, like slaughter the hogs.
Although the residents here were free, they did not escape threats like frequent visits by slave patrols looking for runaways.
They would come through here in the evenings, in the night, and the people had to go out to the cemetery and hide. They would come through pretty often, yeah. But the people in this community, all of them got together and they had a plan of surviving. They had some of everything here because They built the school, and they all came together to build the church. My grandfather, Holloway Smith, gave the property.
They named their church Gabrielle Chapel A.M.E. Zion, which opened its doors in 1866. Cuffeytown holds several historic sites, including this cemetery, where 13 Black Civil War soldiers from this community, known as the Cuffeytown 13, were laid to rest.
My great-grandfather, his wife, on both sides, mom and dad, they're buried here. I'm currently a landowner here in the community. My ancestors owned farm and tenant land here, and it's one of those things they saw then as being important, and it's important today.
Over the years, the number of original families who call Cuffeytown home has dwindled, but those who remain hold on to its rich history and eagerly share that history with the future generations to ensure that Cuffeytown takes its rightful place in the American history narrative. I'm Jordan Yowell.
And that's Jordan Yowell, the daughter of our show producer, Lisa Godley. Lisa, what was that experience like for Jordan to go back and look at some of her family history?
Barbara, it was such a learning experience for both of us. I've always grown up knowing that I was related to Cuffeys. My dad's sister, my Aunt Jenny, married Raymond Cuffey, and of course, that made my cousins Cuffeys. And having an opportunity to research this community of free Black people named Cuffeytown was just a mind-blowing experience for both Jordan and me.
Absolutely. Well, Reverend Hutchinson, where exactly is Cuffeytown? So if people don't know, where are you guys?
Cuffeytown is located in a community known as Hickory. Most people know Hickory. They think of Hickory, North Carolina, but there's actually a Hickory, Chesapeake. The actual name is Long Ridge, and so that's what it's known as. It was later kind of called Cuffeytown because of the history that the Cuffeys had brought to the community.
And so it's about, it's very close to the North Carolina line. Is that correct?
It's fairly close to the North Carolina line, but it's not far from Hickory High School. If people know Hickory High School, it's that community. Some people still call it Great Bridge. So.
Gotcha. And Colonel Moses, you Moses Whitehurst, you grew up in Cuffeytown, right?
Certainly.
So when you heard that story, did it bring back some memories?
Always. And nowadays, when people approach me and ask me where I'm from, I'm just so proud to tell them because I can say, Google it. Google historic Cuffeytown. And they look at me as if I'm out of a space magazine or something. And they Google it and they see historic Cuffeytown pops up. Yeah. I say, okay, go further into it and you'll find out a lot more. That it was built by freedmen. And I put emphasis on freedmen. And I get a lot of glaring stares when I do tell them that. And I'm just so proud to pass on my heritage, where I came from, how I was raised. Although people, still to this day try to put us back.
So, Reverend Hutchinson, take us back. What was going on? 1700s, a bunch of free Blacks got together. They put together this community. What was it all about?
Well, let me go back to one thing. I guess as an educator, I was always interested in the history. Willis Augustus Hodges has a great autobiography out where he talks about the history of Princess Anne community, of the Long Ridge community and its development. And one of the things, and I know he talked about the people being free and put emphasis on free. And that's important because people didn't realize that they were free Blacks, not as a source of because we were free, we were better than the slaves, but the idea that during that time, there were people who were free and people did not realize it. But the important part of that is that in order to be free, someone had to buy your freedom. Or someone had to die in order for you to be free, or you had to have been born of a white woman. And then your freedom was established. So, of course, this was before the Emancipation Proclamation. So in order for people to be a part of a free community, they owed homage to those who helped to buy their freedom. And there are lots of stories about how people were duped out of their freedom. They were, and also people who were free were not allowed to associate legally with slaves because they were afraid if free people were maybe educated, then they would be able to educate some of the slaves or be able to find a way to buy their freedom. And that's what they did not want.
So it's really important to keep that separation between free blacks and those that were enslaved.
Exactly. There is an amazing story about Willis Hodges, who was related to James Cuffey and Samuel Cuffey. The person who wrote this autobiography was related to James Cuffey and Samuel Cuffey, and he tells several stories, but one of them dates back to how one of the members of his family, they really knew he was educated, and they wanted to take land from him. They wanted to stop him from being able to educate other people. And so what they were able to do was they got a slave, because sometimes they could talk the slaves into doing things because the slaves were afraid of the masters. And so because the slaves and the free men were not to work together, they had this one slave go to a gentleman and his family and say, you know, I have some peas that I want to give you. Now, the person who was free knew that he couldn't engage with the slave, but the slave had made a deal with his master. And the master said, you got to get him to get these peas on his property so we can come and have evidence that he was with you. And when the free man would not take the peas, the slave left them in a place where the master knew they would be. And so when the slave owners came and they said, we heard that you've been fraternizing with some of the slaves. And he said no. And they went to the bushel where they had told him to hide them. And this is all recorded in Willis Hodges' autobiography. They saw the peas and they said, you must have been fraternizing with him.
Did they take his land?
So they took his land. They took based off the peas. They whipped him, beat him, and took all of his land. Because even though people were free, what were they really free from? They had to. They still had a set of a code of bondage, so to speak, that they understood that they had to live under. But one of the things Willis Hodges said that was really important to me was that for his family, it was important for them to understand that as they were free, because they were descended from a white grandmother, which is how
they got their freedom.
And so he said was to go back and make sure we could help others be free. And so he actually, and I don't want to take up on the time here, he actually had a brother who knew how to write papers to get people free, but they were kind of forged, and people realized that he was forging these papers, some of them, and when they took his brother to court, they tricked him. They said, can you write? And he thought they were trying to make him feel, oh, yeah, I can write. And so they said, can you write? And he wrote a paragraph out, and they said, because you write so well, we know you had to be the person who wrote these papers to get people free. Wow. But one of Hodges' younger brothers went on to serve in the Virginia General Assembly in the 1800s.
So see, people don't realize that there's all this history that's going on. Let me come back to you again, Colonel Whitehurst, because tell me what life was like growing up in Cuffeytown. Were you on a farm? Was it city? I mean, Give us a sense of what was going on.
Well, we weren't, my house, we weren't farmers.
Okay.
My dad worked at Norfolk Naval Shipyard. So he brought in a paycheck, let's put it that way. But there was farming all around us. There was black farmer, Mr. Odell Cuffey. Now, in the video clip that has gone before that earlier, where Miss Cuffey talked about her father farming the black peas and the butter beans and so forth. There was one prominent black farmer that was in the community, Mr. Odell Cuffey. Now, I can tell you as a kid growing up, he had a pretty large farm that he farmed with a mule and horses and hook up the buggy, and we go down the field and we'd pick his cucumbers, his cantaloupe, his butter beans, and those things will go to market in town, if you will. That's what they used to call it at that time. Coming to Norfolk was going to town. Okay, going down by the waterfront was then going to town.
Wow.
Okay, but my dad brought home a paycheck weekly during that time before it went to biweekly, and my mom did housework, what they used to call piece labor back during that time. So that's how we did it. But we, growing up as kids, my two sisters and I, we'd go out and we worked on the farm, on farms. Then there's another Mr. Carroll Cuffey worked. Who was a Buffalo Soldier, a real Buffalo Soldier, who served in the 10th Cavalry, out in Oklahoma.
Is it Kansas?
Kansas. Okay. And he worked at Norfolk Naval Base, and he farmed part-time. Now, he had a tractor.
That was a big deal.
A big deal. And I do recall when he took leave, he'd farm, get his planting done, and then in the fall, he'd harvest his soybean and corn, and just like the white farmers did.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So, Reverend Hutchinson, you're the pastor of Gabrielle Union. Gabrielle Chapel. Gabrielle Chapel, sorry. A.M.E. Zion Church.
Yes.
That church was built in the 1800s?
1866. It was built in 1866.
By the Cuffey family and by the families that lived in Cuffeytown?
By that group of families, the Civils, the Whitehurst, I think the Sneed name was mentioned, but there were a group of names of people. Smiths. They had a Smiths, Suttons, Spences. We still have a family cemetery out there near the church.
But that church was like the centerpiece in terms of the community, right?
Yes, because let me say this. One of the things that I think is so amazing about the history and research of Cuffeytown, because this young man was born like in the 1940s, 50s.
Yeah.
He was born like the people there before him, his parents and grandparents. What to me distinguishes Cuffeytown from so many other areas, and that church being the centerpiece, is that it became one of the only self-sustaining African American communities to survive in Virginia.
Right.
It became,
and it's still surviving today.
And it's still surviving. That from the 1900s, from these free people of color, they were able, in spite of the fact that Long Ridge was burned, much like, I guess, Oklahoma. Long Ridge was burned to the ground at one point, and they reinvented it and built it up. And it was after the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation, that the land had been given to them, but then they had to have the people who by hand built the original church. I mean, it is amazing to me that out of all they went through, it still survives, and they were self-sustaining. As he said, they had stores. They had their own stores. They had a store next to the church. The church was a centerpiece that thrived because they would do movies and things, I understand, and they would have political discussions like with the NAACP and those kinds of things. They took place in the church. The church was like the Black City Hall, right, in the community, know.
Now, I can recall overhearing discussions about the political issues. I guess I wasn't supposed to be hearing those things, but I can remember hearing them talk about the black vote. And, well, he is not going to be doing these things for the black people. So, no, I don't think we ought to be voting for that one. I can recall
you remember hearing
those
types of conversations
going on. Yeah, listening at the church door.
Wow.
Because, we didn't have cars at the time. We all used to, Cuffey Road wasn't a paved road. It was a dirt path. It was a cart path, if you will. And that's how we went to church. We walked through the path, as you see it today, around the curve and go to the church. Now, let me hark a bit about the evolution as I saw it through my eyes of Gabrielle Chapel. As I remember Gabrielle Chapel, a wooden building on wood blocks.
That's right. That's
lumber.
Right. That's right.
Round lumber timber blocks. Then it went from that to cinder blocks to replace the wooden blocks. Okay. And another amazing thing, August meeting, they used to call it the revival meeting. They didn't call it revival meeting. They called it the August meeting.
Oh, wow.
Second Sunday in August. Now, the men would start the Saturday before the second Sunday, okay? They started erecting tables all the way around the church on the Cuffey Road side, okay? And the women would start cooking the beginning of the week. So that
cook all week long for that
all
revival.
Week long. And I remember my mom, we didn't have running water. I remember pumping bucket after bucket after bucket of water so that we kept whatever she needed for washing the dishes, kept the dishes clean, and she cooked. And she used to pack they used to call them overseas trunks, ship trunks full of food. And we'd take that out to the church. She had her stand. Mrs. Cuffey, Miss Dorita Cuffey had her stand. The Browns, everybody had their place marked off.
And they were all there.
But the interesting thing is, nobody ate until the last service.
And with that food all out there, nobody got sick either.
Nobody got sick.
The pumped water, all of that.
Yeah, coming out of the ground. Nothing purified.
So let me ask them, because Cochise, I want to bring you into the conversation. So there's also an historic cemetery there, because 13 of the men from Cuffeytown served in the U.S. Color Troops. Yeah, tell us about that.
And by them serving in the U.S. Color Troops during that time, no one had recognized the fact that that's what they had done. Normally there would be because Dr. Alexander, who was there doing the homework way back in 2000, and I imagine 2004 to 2006 or 7, when we met Dr. Alexander, he had done the homework like what she just pulled up there, and found out that, if you got more than, and I could be wrong, more than 2 or 3 U.S. Color Troops buried in one cemetery, it could be designated as a veterans cemetery.
Right. But this cemetery actually is not run by the government, is it?
And that's what Dr. Alexander was trying to establish. And so what they in turn done, he made it known that we have 13 U.S. Colored Troops buried here. There's nothing here signifying that there are even soldiers buried here, and that's how we got involved. Because
so what did the Buffalo Soldiers Motorcycle Club do?
So once we found out, one of our members found Cuffeytown, and when they found Cuffeytown, we were like, "Oh wow, this is great! This is some kind of historical place that we would like to participate with and partner with." And so we went in and talked to Dr. Pastor Griffin, and asked him, what could we do to help you recognize those soldiers? He said, well, one thing we would like to get us a flagpole, a flag out there. So
there was no markings or
anything?
There
was no marking. Nope. The only thing was out there was just the gravestones, and it had been grown over for a long period of time, and so they had recently just started to clear the area to where people could get back there to even just go to their family members. So they had just started to do this, and so we came along to, okay, you want a flagpole up? That's what we're gonna do. And so we gathered the funds, we raised the money, and a couple of our members, we went out there and got the pole and to put it up there.
Wow.
And so Pastor, the whole community was ecstatic over the whole event, us coming out there. And like I said, I'm new to this area, so I didn't even know nothing about Cuffeytown. I'm retired Army, but I retired out of Fort Story and was riding motorcycles, and had never heard of prior to that Buffalo. So just heard Buffalo Soldiers, but not really a whole lot
to understand exactly what it was all about.
And then when I heard about Cuffeytown, and there was some U.S. colored troops buried, and no one had recognized them, now that kind of brought a whole lot different light on it to me, for me. And I kind of took it to heart. Okay, this is my time to give something back to a community that seemed like people had forgotten about.
If you're just joining us, it's an Another View history lesson about Cuffeytown, a Chesapeake community created by free blacks in the 1700s. Our guests are Reverend Dr. Sandi Hutchinson, pastor of Gabrielle Chapel A.M.E. Zion Church, located in the heart of Cuffeytown, retired Army Colonel Moses Whitehurst, who grew up in Cuffeytown and has done extensive research on its history, and Larry Hicks, a.k.a. Cochise, a member of the Buffalo Soldiers Motorcycle Club, and their efforts to honor the soldiers of the United States colored troops buried in the Cuffeytown Cemetery. It is unusual for a community then to be able to take over this historic cemetery and actually continue to maintain it and run it, as opposed to the federal government taking over. Is that right?
Well, the federal government, I think once we placed the flagpole on the ground, I believe the state government started to pay more attention. And then I don't know if the federal government have gotten more involved with it, but I do know the city officials, because before we put the flagpole in the ground, there were not many city officials who participated, came out there to support it. Once we had put the flagpole there, then city officials started to take notice. And then once the city officials started to take notice, I think Dr. Alexander's work, he was petitioning for it to be at the state level to become a state,
a landmark
for the state. And so he was pushing for that the whole time. And I believe once he got that started, then all of a sudden, people start to take notice. Like Colonel Whitehurst said, Google it.
Google it.
Yeah. So now you can Google it, but back then no one even knew it existed out there.
There is a group called the Cuffeytown Foundation. The Cuffeytown Foundation, and they have done a lot to bring notice and make sure that cemetery will be maintained. I think we have a couple of 501c3s that are involved.
So was it called Cuffeytown because the Cuffeys were the majority?
Yes.
Is that what it was? Okay.
Yes.
Even though there were many different families. So what is Cuffeytown like today?
Before we go to that one, let's go back to the cemetery.
Okay.
Growing up as a kid, now we cleaned the cemetery once a year.
Oh, wow.
That was Memorial Day. All the men and the boys, we'd ascend on the cemetery about 7:30 in the morning, and we'd go from the far end, from where the approach is today, the far end, and work back to where the flagpole is, cleaning every grave. And that was it.
Wow.
And not.
So let me ask you this, Colonel. When you were doing that and others were working and so forth, did you guys realize the significance of what this really meant? Or was this just, this is where we live and this is what we do?
I will tell you that perhaps was twofold. Perhaps this is where we live, and we do this out of respect for Memorial Day. Our buried, our dead folk, we clean the graves during Memorial Day. And I do recall looking at the headstone of the Civil War vet with Whitehurst on it. U.S. colored troop with Whitehurst on it.
I have a picture of that on my phone.
And what did that mean to me at that time? I can't tell you.
What's it mean to you today?
One of my ancestors was a United States colored troop that fought in the Civil War.
Wow.
No one taught that to me in school.
Yeah.
Okay? And that wasn't talked about around my dinner table. Okay? Was that out of fear as we ascended through life? I don't know.
What I do believe, though, if you don't mind, is that I think that most people, while they are growing up living history, they don't realize that they're writing history. Right? They are growing up in a community, their home. They don't realize, because that's why it's history. They don't realize until years later why this is significant. People have said to me, I've only been the pastor there 6 years, and sometimes I get, well, she's not from here, and why is she doing this?
What do you know?
Right. But because I am an educator, because I was interested in the history. As a matter of fact, I taught Lisa Godley. She was one of my English students because and I
what
think
kind of student was she?
Great.
Are you just saying that?
No, I am not. I loved her. She was one of my very favorites. When I look back at things, because I'd heard of Cuffeytown. I never knew that I would be the pastor there, but I am excited now to be a part. I think that's part of the reason God puts us in certain situations to bring notoriety, and while many of them had lived there, maybe not doing a lot of the research, they just knew it as home. It was incumbent upon me to find out more about the history and bring it to the forefront, especially in light of CRT today and all these things that I didn't even know were coming to the table when I first went there. But I think God put me in a place where I could help re-emerge some of this and share with people, because they're like, well, I grew up there. I know this. Well, great. I want you to share what you remember so it's not lost forever.
So are the families that formed Cuffeytown and the prominent families that were there, do they still own land there today? Are their ancestors, their descendants still there? Or are other people moving in? How much of Cuffeytown is still Cuffeytown, if you understand what I'm saying?
Cuffeytown is still Cuffeytown.
Okay.
Absolutely. Cuffeytown is still Cuffeytown. Handed down generation to generation. And to put capital letters on that, I have instilled into my children that what my father has handed down to us, his 3 kids, will remain in our family into infinitum.
You know, and the reason I ask that is because, as we know, across the United States, there are lots of families that were in communities, lots of black families, who either the descendants sold the land, or the land was taken from them, or, you know, there were a lot of different circumstances around that. So that's good to hear.
And let me continue that a bit.
Sure.
Recently, family, both the patriarch and matriarch, died. The kids sold the property. The one said, "We're tired of paying taxes." Well, you live, you pay taxes, and you die. But my belief, and was what's instilled in me, and I've instilled it in my children, heritage in broad letters should be stamped on one's forehead.
Because it's just that important.
What our forefathers went through to be able to have something. And the fact that where we come from was handed to you free, was built by freed people, as Dr. Hutchinson said, that somebody paid the price for them to be free, but nonetheless, they were freed people. This was given to them free. Let's keep it that way.
And let's keep it in the family.
And let's keep it in the family.
And I want to comment on,
Go ahead,
and that is the reason why we Buffalo soldiers, you know, we ride motorcycles, but really we're here to educate young people about their history. So that way, and the motorcycles, the only thing the motorcycles does is actually bring people to you. And then you get to talk about, well, then they're going to want to know, well, a lot of people always ask the question, well, Buffalo, is that in New York? No. That's not what we stand for. We carrying on that legacy of some people, and we're riding on the backs of those people that came way before us. And we're just trying to ensure that it doesn't get lost. And I say this a lot. If we don't tell our history, who going to tell it? And so we have to be able to let young people know that you have a long line of history behind you to get you where you at right now. Don't forget that. Don't walk out and no disrespect to the families, but for them to sell the land, you know, they just did their whole family
an injustice.
The whole family.
Because so if I may add to that, because and having been a planning commissioner for the city, you know, all families, unfortunately, don't feel like his family. There are some families out there, but the demographics of that community has changed, and it is changing. There were some people who feared that the church may not survive because as people moved away and out and sold land, there wouldn't be enough in the immediate community to keep it going. And people, you know, with all these other churches outside, they wanted to go to a community church. People would, when they moved to Norfolk or outside, then they're going to go to other churches, and the church would not survive. So when our church burned,
I know I'm going to talk to you about that in just a minute. We're going to talk about that.
So when the church burned down, we found what? Why did it take us so long to begin the rebuilding process? Because the land on which the church sat had been rezoned by the city. So the very next day, and a lot of people didn't know that community.
Well, hold on. Let's go back. No, because I want to help people understand what happened. This happened 2 years ago?
August 28th, 2020.
Okay. In 2020, the church caught on fire.
Yes.
It was deemed that it was caught on fire by lightning.
That's correct. That's what it was deemed.
That's how it was deemed. But then you found that when you wanted to go back to rebuild, the land had been rezoned.
Which meant, people wanted the land. People were coming out when the smoke was still rising, and people members of my church were going, these good people here have come out and they want to help us. I think they keep asking if we have insurance and how much insurance we have and if we're going to plan to rebuild. And I said, some of those people aren't trying to help us. They're trying to help themselves. Be careful what you say, and so it wasn't that I was trying to take over, so to speak. The idea was that I knew anything they said, you had to be careful how you spoke and the information that you gave out and how it could be used against you. So we had to actually petition the city to get them to allow us to build the church back on property that had been given to them in the 1700s. Now, mind you, Chesapeake had not been a city as long as the church had sat on that property. So that was shocking to people, and some people are like, well, what is she doing? What happened? Wasn't me. It was the city. So we had to get a conditional use permit. So for people who don't know what a conditional use permit literally translates, is that after fighting for almost a year, going to the planning department, going to city council, what they do is they give you a conditional use permit, meaning that this building that you're building, this church, no longer meets the conditions of the future use that we had for this community, but we will now grant you permission to build your church back.
But the deed of the church has the land. I mean, it says that you guys owned the land.
But it's like with a lot of people don't realize that people can, they come in and claim, some of them, they were using terms like squatters' rights and things they didn't understand. And, but they were.
Where are you now in the church rebuilding process?
So now in the rebuilding process, we have started to rebuild. We're building a steel building. Some people may, because it took us so long to get permission, and of course city codes aren't the same, right? So now we've got to pay exorbitant fees to meet the new codes in order to build, and there's not running water out there, so we can't have fire extinguishers in the church. So what we're doing is, steel, when we started the process, was $400 a ton, right? It was $400 a ton. By the time we got approval to build in the middle of COVID, steel was $2,000 a ton. Wow. So while we had a face value insurance policy that was going to put us close, we knew we were going to have to raise some money. Some people also then thought we would really be outpriced to build, because then they're saying, oh, you need this new septic system and it's going to cost you over $100,000. But we had some property where we could, we had to tear down the old parsonage and something else. We had to tear it down to open up a reservoir that was already there. What do we call those in the front? Retention pond. The retention pond that was in the front. So we were able to enlarge it and do some things where we still have to get the new septic systems. We have to meet the codes. But because we could enlarge that property, we were able to not have to spend as much money. But if I may go back to something that he said about the original church, one of the reasons that the church did burn so fiercely loosely from the beginning is because the brick, the brick was a facade around a part of the original old clapboard building, wood from 1800s, from before it was treated. It wasn't treated. We have one of the frames from the original, and I get emotional, from the old church. We were able to keep almost intact from the fire, and the builder is going to incorporate it in an area of the church where it will be able to be preserved for historic purposes. But the clapboard building, was still under there, which really meant something. And so we tried to save as many pieces of that did not burn from the fire, that we're going to make some artwork with, old pieces of stained glass. We're going to have them encased in some frames. I'm just emotional.
Preserve the history. So is Cuffeytown a historic landmark? Yes. Or is there something working towards that? Go ahead, Colonel.
Back, as Cochise alluded to, when the work started in the early 2000s with Dr. Alexander and my sister, Julia Gregory, at the time, they put together a team with a Reverend Griffin, and they started the historical documentation work, and it went forth, and the church became a historical landmark that's now in the halls of Congress. Okay. As well as Cuffeytown Cemetary. The cemetery itself is a historical landmark. And you will find signs leading to historic Cuffeytown.
Because before there was no markers.
On 168, pointing you to Cuffeytown.
The brown signs.
Okay.
Gotcha. And on the grounds, there's a marker that portrays Cuffeytown. It's still there.
Yes. On the edge of the parking lot.
Talks about the history.
So the Cuffeytown Historic Gabrielle Chapel and the cemetery is all documented in the halls of Congress.
It's on. We know it's on the state registry, and
so it's on the National Historic Registry as well.
All right,
National Historic Registry. Yeah.
So we've come a long way since. Since 2000, and I'm going to say between 2000 and 2000s, early 2000s, we've come a long way in getting documentation to where it needed to be, to where now, like he said, you can Google it. But I want to go back to what the Colonel was talking about, the Veterans Day. And this is how we got started with Pastor Griffin. He said, well, what else could y'all possibly do? So he said, well, can we come out and do a veterans, host a flag on veterans? And he said, well, that sounds like a good, because y'all was doing already, going out there on Veterans Day. They already had a program for Veterans Day. And so we in turn said, well, we'll be honored to come out here and do something with y'all and support the community on Veterans Day. Since y'all already having a celebration, let us help you with that.
Further that.
And so, and that's what we've been doing for the past, I guess, 15 years.
Wow.
Since 2007. We've been doing this.
And I was glad when I came, they didn't stop.
Because it's part of us. And if you go to our website, it's on there about Cuffeytown.
Cuffeytown. Yeah. So let me ask you very quickly, and we only got about 5 minutes left, but I know the time goes by fast. So tell us a little bit about what the Black Civil War soldiers did that were buried there.
Well, they were, Civil War.
Yeah.
So, they got the...
These soldiers fought for the Union.
These soldiers fought for the Union. However, even though they fought for the Union, they still got substandard equipment. They still was not... They was able to fight. They was able to receive a check. However, they was doing the menial work, such as digging ditches, taking care of the livestock. They was taking care of the grounds, making sure that they were taken care of. Very rarely did they probably get to fight. They just took care of things, and horses, took care of the stables, farmed, went around the local farmers, gathered food for the soldiers. So they probably did a lot of the menial work. However, they was proud to wear the blue uniform with the gold buttons, brass buttons, shall I say. They was proud to even do that, to be called a soldier for the U.S. Colored Troop. And they, when they joined, they was doing it for respect. They wanted to earn the respect of the white men, to help them understand that, hey, we are men too, and we are willing to fight for this country as well as you are.
Absolutely. Yeah. So
Now,
we got 3 minutes left. I want to ask each of you to just give either a memory or something you want people to know about Cuffeytown. Let me start with you, Cochise.
That the flagpole recognizes all the U.S. colored troops that are buried in Cuffeytown.
Oh.
And that, to me, is the most proudest moment for the Buffalo Soldiers. That flagpole standing
Fantastic. That's Larry Hicks, a.k.a. Cochise, who is a member of the Buffalo Soldiers Motorcycle Club that has come together to honor the soldiers who are buried there. Colonel.
A couple things that we did have some Union soldiers, United States Colored Troops, that fought right here in Hampton Roads at Wilson's Wharf that are buried there in our cemetery. And the second thing that we had 2 real Buffalo soldiers from Cuffeytown that were modern day soldiers from Cuffeytown. Yes.
Absolutely. That is Colonel Moses Whitehurst, who lived in Cuffeytown, who still lives there, I assume. And
I make Maryland home.
Oh, did you make Maryland home now? Okay.
I'm here frequently.
Okay.
And will always be home.
Thank you.
And thank you for making the drive
member
today.
of Gabrielle Chapel A.M.E. Zion Church.
Amen. And Reverend Hutchinson.
You know, some people often say that the most dangerous animal alive today is an educated black man or woman. And so I say that because I was kind of surprised, but I found that almost all of the descendants of the people in Cuffeytown were educated, had college degrees. Their children, I'm talking about, or they went into the military. That their children went into the military, they served, or they went to college or a trade school.
Wow. That's and so you are continuing to build the church?
We are continuing. I left there right before I came here.
And that is Pastor Sandi Hutchinson. She is pastor of Gabrielle Chapel A.M.E. Zion Church, which is located in the heart of Cuffeytown. Thank you all so much for bringing this history alive for us. I want to encourage the audience to go out and check out Cuffeytown, see what's going on, and we really appreciate it. And you know, African American history is American history, and we've learned so much today. Thank you all. I can't thank you all enough for that. Do me a favor and share this show with a friend. Just go to anotherviewradio.org and download the podcast. And while you're there, please sign up for our eView newsletter. It's a once-a-week reminder of upcoming shows. And next week on Another View, it's going to be the Another View Roundtable, which was always intelligent conversation about issues that you care about. If you want to know more about Cuffeytown, as they said, as all of our guests have said, please Google it because the information is absolutely there. Our theme music is an original composition created especially for Another View by Jay Sennett. Lisa Godley is our show producer. She's also a descendant or a family member of the descendants of Cuffeytown. And Jordan Christie is our audio engineer. I'm Barbara Ham-Lee. Thanks so very much for listening. And let's get together again next Thursday at noon for Another View.
Support comes from Thomas Nelson Community College, now becoming Virginia Peninsula Community College, the first choice, whether starting your bachelor's degree or advancing your career. More at tncc.edu.
Support comes from Hampton Roads Community Foundation, carrying out your charitable wishes forever, whether it's helping shelter animals, feeding the homeless, enhancing the arts, or supporting students. Learn more at leaveabequest.org.